I caught wind of the Kerbal Space Program, or KSP Community, when I came across an Ask Reddit thread with responses about the best video game community. The top answer was Kerbal Space Program. I had never heard of the game, but the more I read, the more I was intrigued. While I don't have a ton of experience in active online communities, I have been exposed to many video game communities through observing the participation of others in my various circles of friends and family. Sometimes these communities are lackluster, and sometimes they can be kind of vicious. I've seen close communities and communities that share a lot of information. However, I've never come across any others quite as robust and friendly as the KSP community. So the KSP community is an off-branch of the official KSP game site. While the main community page features only forums, wiki, mods, and news, there are many routes that one might take across the Affinity space. Viewing areas on the KSP site is very simple. Guests are welcome to look through forums and other areas. In order to post or otherwise add content, one must set up an account. The account requires email authentication, but will then allow new users to create content immediately. Members are assigned reputation points, which are gathered as other community members officially like your added content. There are rules about how frequently you may add to another's reputation, and in my observation, people are much less likely to add likes to content than one might be used to seeing in other places. This makes the like feature quite a bit different than other ways we might use it. We often see it used as an appreciative acknowledgement, think about Twitter and Facebook, whereas here it's used as a fairly specific tool. I have collected exactly one like on any of my KSP posts, and thus I have a +1 reputation, which places me firmly in neutral territory. In addition to reputation, you receive a rank and title, which is noted alongside your username. As I have added content, and only content added on separate threads counts, I have gone from newbie rank to Bottle Rocketeer, a title that I rather enjoy. This is a good place to start looking at other aspects of the KSP community that are structured in ways that might be a bit different than other online spaces. As we look at the guidelines, we find a fairly comprehensive set of rules that govern the space. While community members are very much encouraged to participate, it is clear that squad members are ultimately able to make decisions about community content and participation, including removing content and warning users. The squad is often used interchangeably with staff on the website. I was never able to completely confirm that they are always the same as each other, but the background of KSP suggests that the squad members are all employees. As I looked into it, I found that Squad is actually the company from which KSP originated. If you take a look at the history page, you'll find that the story is a bit unusual. Squad is a marketing agency out of Mexico City that encouraged the original KSP developer to pursue his gaming project with Squad after he told them that he would be leaving the company to create a video game about space. According to the Wikipedia page, the company has expanded its general purview beyond marketing since the success of the KSP project. You'll find that squad members are fairly easy to find on the site. There is even a staff page that gives user names and profile access for these individuals. Squad members also have this designation added to their user title, so it's really easy to identify them throughout the space. I find the involvement of the developers and other staff members to be quite nice, as I think they set the tone for the community space, which includes a lot of praise for other participants. They also share credit for issues that have come up and are resolved by the community, and they provide an underlying sense of humor that helps keep things more playful. And as you'll soon see, this is very much a structure that has been cultivated along the way. I started off this project with a lot of interest in gameplay. I liked the idea of becoming more knowledgeable about rockets and spaceships. This interest in the game also helped direct my initial forays into the KSP Affinity space. I sought out answers to questions like, what are the basic parts of a rocket? Which terms do I need to really understand in order to get started? Is crashing nose first into the ground a common problem in the flight tutorial? What do I do once I get into space? I looked for existing answers and threw the questions out to the forums at times when I couldn't find them. I introduced myself and unabashedly admitted to my newbie status. People were welcoming and encouraging. In my introductory post, I noted that I had been drawn to the KSP community by the discussion thread claiming the space as being among the most friendly and encouraging. A few people did remark on this, with the most developed response being from Habaru-san, who notes, "Much of the credit for this belongs with our benevolent forum moderator overlords. It's not an accident. There are rules here and they're enforced aggressively. This group has its fair share of flare-ups like any other place on the internet, but here they get warned, deleted, and locked. Not only does this make things appear more friendly than they might have really been at the time, but it also stops silly feuds quickly and limits the amount of long-term bad blood that develops. I have not witnessed any flare-ups during my time in the KSP community. I have seen a few places on the boards where people seem to be giving each other a hard time, but it's difficult to determine if they have personal relationships that allow for some jibing, or if they are actually a bit annoyed with one another. For example, I saw a bit of a hemming about grammar use in the writing forum, and in this photo you see a spot on the Make-A-Wish and Have It Horribly Corrupted thread game where there's either a bit of a language barrier issue going on or potentially some spamming. None of what I spotted seemed to have a large impact on the overall course of discussion or play, although it's unclear to me if there were any individuals negatively impacted in these instances by either being reported to moderators or perhaps feeling discouraged from future participation. In any case, there is little to be found in the way of overt rudeness or unyielding argument. It's interesting to consider how and why this works in a larger context. The KSP community, at least the areas I have explored, is more of an oligarchy. A small number of people set out and enforce the rules. This is represented by the squad and staff. They have participation guidelines that include the ability of staff to, quote, add, subtract, or edit rules and posts as they see fit without prior notice. I can appreciate that this structure allows the squad to really control and enforce the vision of the site. I can't help but compare this with some of the less welcoming environments I've encountered in the past and think that there's something to be said for a really structured setup. However, I also wonder how much work it takes on the part of moderators and squad members, and how maintainable is such a space in the long run? Who controls the overall vision for this space? Is that also changeable without notice? Additionally, it is unclear how much control an individual moderator or squad member might have over each individual piece of content. Removing content is one thing if it doesn't meet the guidelines or is offensive, but editing is another. I don't think that it's likely, but there is a certain implication that's a bit jarring. So as time has gone by, I've become less interested in playing the KSP game. I found the learning curve a bit out of my grasp in relation to the amount of time I was willing to invest in gameplay. Apparently, space travel is not for me, which I shouldn't really feel surprised by, because despite my love of science fiction, I find space pretty intimidating and would be a very unenthusiastic astronaut. However, I'm still very attached to the community. The game brought me to the Affinity space, and the space is largely very focused on the game. However, because the KSP community has so many different aspects, I can still happily contribute with suggestions, friendly conversation, feedback, and even participate in completely different games that community members have started up as part of the space. My distance from the KSP game does limit some of my involvement with certain areas of the community. It would be difficult for me to have much discussion of different game aspects that require close knowledge of gameplay. Not that I'd be able to discuss 4x4 edge pairs, even if I were playing more often. Despite being an outlier in the community, I'm still benefiting and learning from the game and the Affinity space, even if I'm not an active KSP player. That's pretty cool and very unexpected. For instance, the other day I came across a recent thread from Go/27 wherein they were posting simplified explanations of some basic concepts of astrodynamics, which included a few lovely diagrams and analogies. I'm particularly fond of this one that describes gravity as being like the jumping surface of a trampoline and celestial bodies as being like a bowling ball on that surface. I learned, and I'm tempted to go back to the game and see if my new knowledge helps me make better sense of what I'm doing when attempting to keep a spaceship in orbit. Every time I visit the KSP community, I'm impressed that the enjoyment of, or at least interest in, that this game has brought all these people and all this knowledge together. I think a space like this one makes it very clear how a game could be used to anchor an interest-driven learning space. It's happening right here in front of me. At the same time, and in a more general sense, I wonder what elements could be added to this type of game and affinity space combination for those who maybe need to learn something. In other words, how might this concept be adapted to better include and encourage those with different kinds of motivations? In the case of KSP, I think that a more robust beginners or training program would help a lot. With a little more structured entry into the game itself, or even a more vibrant Start Here section of the community space, I think it would be much easier for those who would not naturally gravitate toward the topic to maybe carve out a little place for themselves and potentially learn a lot more about rockets and spaceships, as well as about a truly useful and engaging community. This general idea would be something to consider for anyone looking to create a learning experience using games. Bringing this back around to our games and learning reading about affinity spaces, let's take a look at 3 of Guy and Hayes' affinity space features and how I see those playing out in the KSP community. I'll start with everyone can, if they wish, produce and not just consume. While there is plenty to be consumed, it is very easy to start adding, and people are willing to give feedback, which encourages even more additions. I have yet to see an introduction go unremarked upon. I've yet found high school students looking for and receiving feedback on fiction they're writing for literature classes. There are KSP TV shows on Twitch created by the community for the community, social media options on Facebook, and a space on the site curse.com for sharing game mods. People create, learn, recreate, communicate, share, disseminate, and, well, they play. While a few names pop up more often than others, there are many different voices that add content to this community. The sheer amount of production going on really makes the KSP space feel like its own little world. There are many different forms and routes to participation. As I've mentioned, I myself have made a lot of use of different routes of participation. I started as a guest, getting a feel for the site. I joined the community, introduced myself, and started asking game-related questions. I've started following threads where people create KSP-inspired art, discuss writing, and try to inspire other community members with their experiences. I now regularly play a couple of the thread-based games, which, if I did nothing else, would make me a regular community participant with little to no discussion of KSP. There seems to be something for everyone who is willing and able to join in and live by the guidelines. Leadership is porous and leaders are resources. This is an area that is interesting to me because I see KSP as being particularly successful as an affinity space, but I don't see leadership as being very porous. While a wide variety of people might have social and intellectual leadership roles that fluctuate based on the topic area and their specializations, I would say that the foundational leadership is very much set and maintained outside of the community. Although I do think it would be interesting to imagine a company like Squad hiring people based on the decisions of the community. Well, that being said, leaders are certainly resources, and whether they be Squad members or community members, there is a lot of accessibility to leadership across the community. When I set out to find an affinity space at the beginning of this project, I wanted a good example of an involved, active online community with positive vibes that defied a lot of the negative expectations I held about video game and internet-based communities. KSP has certainly provided me that. While the KSP community has not proven to be a purely democratic arrangement of KSP fans, I think that the blend of Squad and community works well for the situation. As with any space, there is the risk of change or the inability to maintain the existing standards, but this is mitigated by the fact that the community appears to have attracted a large array of like-minded folks. The exit of an individual, even a highly influential or popular one, is unlikely to have a huge impact on the community structure and overall well-being. I'm very pleased that I have had the opportunity to experience this space, and I hope that you take the time to check it out too. It's a wonderful example of a game bringing people together to create something even bigger and better. Thanks for watching, and please let me know if you have any questions or comments.